Hi, I'm Kiran Maestri. Welcome to our podcast series, Future of Our People. It's a series dedicated to leaders who are shaping the future of work. Each week, we engage with senior leaders and delve into transformative dynamics of today's leadership, workforce, and employee engagement. On that note, I'm pleased to join by Mr. Arun Gupta, who has more than 4 decades of experience in technology and business leadership, working for multinational companies. And most recently, he's also a board member for Hemas Pharmaceuticals and also co-founder of Fortytwo Labs. Arun, pleased to have you with us today.
Thank you, Kiran. Pleasure to be here.
In fact, I was looking forward for this one, for this meeting, Arun. Let's dive in. Many leaders speak about why behind what they do. Could you share with us your core purpose that drives you and how your core purpose has shaped your journey?
So that's a difficult question because core purpose changes as you grow. When I started my career along almost 4 decades, it was all about being or doing something which added value. As a young professional, you want to be visible, you want to grow. And I realized very quickly in my career that for growth, you need visibility and you need a differentiated work. Working hard is not good enough. You have to also have to make sure people are aware of what you're doing. Over the years, the purpose changed as I grew in my organizations and I climbed the ladder. I had to figure out how to manage people. Early learnings in my journey, I used to be very aggressive because I wanted to win. And I wanted my team to win. So in one of my 360-degree feedback, my team member who was a little more vocal said that, Arun sir, you need to also acknowledge and appreciate. You're driving us very hard, but at the same time, when we do something good, you should at least come back and give us a pat on the back. While I know you protect us from the mistakes we make, but there's also the flip side that somebody needs to look at. And I said, yes, point taken, acknowledged. And when I reflected back on my management of the team and how I was dealing with them, and I realized, yes, I was aggressive, I was a taskmaster, and I needed to balance that with people also. So people orientation and task orientation needs to kind of balance each other. And as I grew through different organizations and leadership roles, I also realized that I have to ensure people from within my team can also become leaders. So that was my transition from being a manager to trying to mentor people, trying to coach people, trying to be in a situation where they can become leaders on their own right. Since then, and probably until a few years back, if I count from within my teams, how many people were actually groomed, how many people were able to get to that journey of their own leadership, I can count more than 25 of my direct reports who are today leaders in their own right. And that gives me satisfaction today to say, yes, I left a legacy that will stay for some time. And a lot of those team members have openly acknowledged some contribution that I made to their life, to their journey. So when you talk about core purpose, I think it is today for me, after so many years, to make sure that people are able to succeed, irrespective of what I'm doing, irrespective of the role I'm playing in whichever organization.
It's a very fascinating, Arun, when you said, right, the fundamental, the core at its peak, right, the role of a leader is to create more leaders. And it's phenomenal when you said that more than 25, right, leaders now, the people that you have mentored have become their own leaders. And we often talk about leaders being vulnerability. And thank you for sharing that example when you started all the way back, right, where you're being too aggressive. It often happens. And I think it's a great learning curve for everybody, right? When we start being a manager, we are far more than aggressive. And then as we grow, then we start kind of correcting ourselves. On that note, I have follow up. You made a good point as well, right? How your leadership style evolved. Is there any defining moment in your leadership journey that significantly influenced your approach to leading others? I know you've talked about that feedback that you've got given, but Because you've been a leader for more than 4 decades. You've seen so many turbulent times, right? Was there any defining moment, that kind of moment that you would love to share?
Yes, in one of my offsites many years back with the leadership team, and we were sitting in the evening and having a drink, and my peer, who was the head of operations, comes to me and says, Arun, I know you are obsessed with success. I can see it in everything that you do.
Mhm.
The good thing is you're always smiling whenever you say whatever you say.
Okay.
The not so good thing is let go of that obsession. It is okay to be vulnerable occasionally. And being what I was, I said, Radhika, please explain what do you mean by what you said. And she gave me instances from some of the interactions I had, not just with her or with her team, but across the organization, and said, see, these are places where you could have been a little different. And I said, okay, how do you think I should be different? And she helped me with pointers. Occasionally, she would point out, Arun, this is where you should have done something differently. And I'm thankful to her to give me some of that input, which otherwise I would have just missed. Because when you look at the mirror yourself, you see the best you. You don't see the you that other people perceive. And she showed me the difference between my perception and my reality. So that was one of the key defining moments for me in terms of, yes, while today I have 60 people in my team and I'm managing them, and everyone in the organization locally and globally acknowledges the work we are doing, but at the same time, I think it matters to be also seen as a human being with a human face to it.
So how did I'm very curious as well, right? How did the transition, how difficult was the transition? When that's great when people have given feedback, but how did you take that feedback? Was that easy transition? I know, I'm sure it could not be, but just wanted to understand a bit more about the difficulty around the transition.
The transition to being where I wanted to be took almost a decade.
Okay.
It did not happen in a month or a year or a couple of years. It took that long because you have qualities ingrained in yourself on how you want to be. What is your success formula? What is your winning formula? You, by default, go back to that mode of behavior. And when you're in stress, that's always something that happens. When in a normal situation, probably you will have time to introspect and say, okay, I will do something differently, but it rarely happens because stress is a part of life. Stress is a part of work life. And one of the things I started doing after that conversation, occasionally go back to my peers and ask them, how am I doing? Do you think I can do something different? So that feedback loop that I created for myself actually helped me. Initially, in the initial years, whenever somebody gave me feedback, I would probably do a counter and say, no, but this was the reason I did it. And then one interesting workshop that I attended by Marshall Goldsmith, the best coach you can find in the world. And he said that the only thing you say when somebody gives you feedback is thank you. And it hit me because he gave me examples of what and how. This is a workshop with some 50 odd people, but then the way he interacts in the workshop, you believe that he's only talking to you. And I realized that that's a great trait I should inculcate if I can. I don't think I'm there as yet, but it's been work in progress for me. So the feedback loop is what helped me get to a situation where I said, okay, this helps me in checking where I am in my journey and then make corrections as required. Probably towards the later part of my career, I can say that yes, there was a transformed Arun compared to from where I started.
And in fact, you made a very good point. I'm a big fan of myself, Mr. Marshall Goldsmith as well, right? In fact, treat feedback as a gift and always say thank you. Whenever you get feedback, always say thank you. And unfortunately, still the feedback is very underutilized in many organizations, right? Pretty much we're doing this annual surveys.
Yes.
Whereas the current generation, the things have changed in the past to the future, right? Current generations, they don't want to wait annually. In fact, they want ongoing conversations and in fact,
Yes.
feedback. So it's clearly evident that, right, how you leveraged feedback as an opportunity to upskill yourself and become better version of yourself and transition from a very challenging situation you are in and you kind of convert it to a success. But by the way, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. Now, you being a board member, I don't know, you're sitting at the almost at the top level. So now you've got more opportunity to advise as well. So as a board member, from your perspective, what qualities or initiatives should organization prioritize to foster innovation and stay ahead in the competitive landscape? Because things are changing and we are living in the era of generative AI that has a profound impact the way we live and work. So how you as a board member what kind of advices or what are the things that you look at?
So at a board level, there is a key difference that the board member has to look at versus being a part of the leadership team.
Okay.
Operational and execution challenges.
Okay.
Careers where we were managing operations and execution, there's a tendency to start telling the CEO or the CFO, this is what you should be doing. And that's a risk.
Okay.
We interact with the organization not as frequently as the people running it. So if I'm getting into a monthly meeting or a quarterly board meeting, I'm getting a view that they are presenting, but they are on the field. I'm in the stands. On the field, you take any action that you think is right, depending on the information you have, depending on the context that you know. It's very easy to give advice from the stands and say, but you could have done something different. This is one thing that I saw in my early days as a board member in a smaller organization to say, okay, I can learn here. And then when I moved into the board of a larger organization, I was a little conscious of that to say, no, I don't want to give you solutions, but I want to give you ideas on how you can look at things differently. So when we interact with the management, the leadership teams, every board meeting has every CXO presenting whatever happened in the last quarter or whatever happened in the last month. We focus more on the future direction, the strategy, rather than the operating model and what is changing. So unless there's a compliance issue, and compliance is a big thing nowadays, we read in the newspapers every day about all the unicorns going down the drain. Governance becomes very, very critical as a tenet that the board has to manage. And wherever there's a failure of governance, I would probably say the board was not clued into the organization's dynamics. Otherwise, why can this happen? Because every time you're getting to see a compliance report, an audit report, and if you haven't really gone deeper into the yellow flags, they'll become red sooner or later.
So it's very interesting what you shared as well, Arun. Does it happen, you being a board member, again, this is more from a learning perspective, right? Does it happen where board members have different opinions, whereas CEO is leading and managing the strategy and actions have difference of opinions, despite the advice being given from the board, but still CEO persists with their own strategy? Is it very often do you see that, or other way is CEO would take board members? What do you see?
It's a mixed bag. It is not that always the CEO would take whatever the board is saying and with it. CEOs also, as an expert in the industry, as an expert in the organization, have a point of view, and they have to then convince the board members using data, not just feelings. Because finally it all comes back to what is the data saying? Is it aligned with what you are proposing as an action versus what the board is saying? If it is aligned with what the board is saying, then it's very easy. So we have had conflicts. We have had agreements. At the end of it, the board has to be mature enough to acknowledge the CEO's point of view
Yes.
and give freedom.
Hmm.
Without the freedom, what happens? If something goes wrong, you can always come back and say, the board, you had told me to do this, I did it, it didn't work. And that's a balance that the board has to maintain with the management team. The big thing there is to make sure your strategy, which you define, is able to take you forward. You don't change strategies very often, because if you're changing strategies very often, then it's not a strategy, it's a plan.
Got it.
Plans can change, strategy should not change.
Agreed. So it's more of a board member. I love the point. It's a great learning curve. It's more of a think tank helping and supporting CEOs to take the business forward and use data as a fuel to come to some logical discussions to happen. So from your rich 4 decades of experience, I always wanted to ask you this question as well. From what are the key qualities that distinguish a good leader from a great one, and especially in today's business environment?
I think the key ones that I would probably want to mention: one, listen to your people.
Okay.
Second, be empathetic. Make sure you're focusing on the task rather than the people if something goes wrong. Because the general tendency, you did not do something because of which this happened. It is not about that person, it's about what happened and how can you do it differently next time. But I think a good leader is able to take his or her team to extraordinary opportunities rather than taking extraordinary people and then trying to create opportunities. I've had many types of teams that I inherited. In some cases, I created my own team. And my CEO in one organization said, Arun, you can fire whoever you want. And this is on the second day of my joining this organization. Because the internal perception of the team was not very good.
Okay.
Sometime, thank you for the freedom. We didn't fire anyone. But the same team achieved everything that we wanted to, which was earlier not possible. So what does it point to? There was no direction to the team. There was no leadership for the team. There were only task managers telling them what to do. Why is this not done? When will this get done? This is not of good quality. Everything has that negative connotation to it. And how does it motivate the team? So when I joined the organization, I spent first 30 days understanding each and every member of the team, the culture of the team, the way it's perceived across the organization. Actually went and sat with almost all layers of the organization to understand how are they getting the service that they expect from my team. And slowly and steadily created triggers for the team as well as communication to the rest of the organization on what we are doing. Because the communication actually reinforces the behaviors that people see, right? And goes back to one of those principles from Marshall Goldsmith, which says that you can change, but people will still see you through the same old glasses until it is reinforced multiple times.
Smashing. And I think this was a great example. Thank you, by the way, Arun. Thank you for sharing for that. I mean, how do you turn around, especially when you took over inherited team? They were totally disengaged by the sounds of it, right? They're totally disengaged because of lack of leadership. There was lack of purpose, lack of meaning. And in fact, globally, the statistics says that almost 73% of employees in the current environment are either disengaged or actively disengaged. And if you look at some of the top 5 reasons, could be the lack of leadership, lack of purpose and meaning, lack of recognition, lack of feedback, right? And going back to, you mentioned a very good point around the culture, right? How important is culture for an organization to succeed? You've worked in many companies. So is there anything that you want to share around the culture? And I'm sure you'd have seen some great culture where everybody transpired, or you would have seen some companies where you had to do a lot of cultural transformation as well.
There was a management guru which said, culture eats strategy
for breakfast.
And that is reality across many organizations. Yes, I have been across organizations, Kiran, where everyone was aligned, and there are also companies where everyone worked in silos.
Yes.
And one of my books that I have given to many, many teams across many organizations is Five Dysfunctions of a Team. It's a wonderful book. And there's another one by the same author called Silos, Politics, and Turf Wars.
Okay.
Okay, you should look up those books. They are wonderful.
Who is the author?
Uh,
I've heard of this. Is this the one, same author who has written 5 Levels of Leadership?
no, that's a different one. I'm sure if you Google it up, you can find it. It's a group called the Table Group. The CEO of that organization has written multiple books on teams, leadership, and those kind of things. There was another wonderful one that I imbibed when I became a consultant and an entrepreneur. It's called Getting Naked. It shows how consultants should be versus what they are.
Okay.
I wish the big four partners read that book. Anyway, so coming back to your question, who defines the culture of an organization? It's the leader. So everyone is watching you all the time. If you are a function head, if you have people reporting to you, they look up to you in terms of behaviors, in terms of how you talk about the rest of the organization, your peers in the organization, and that flows down to the rest of your team. So if as the CFO I talk ill about the CMO, my team will always believe that the marketing team knows nothing. So that's the first starting point. You have to be conscious and you have to make sure that when you're talking to your team, you're only talking about some things that matter rather than gossip. Make sure that they respect not just you, but the rest of the organization also, irrespective of what the reality might be. Because one of the things that happens in most management meetings, everyone comes to the table, they listen to whatever is being said, they nod their heads and go back, irrespective of whether they agree or not. And whatever decision gets taken, they say, yeah, that was expected to happen, kind of a thing. And they go back to do whatever they were planning to do any which way, which is where the misalignment happens between the management teams. And this is where organizations struggle to make progress. So in one of my organizations, the CEO, he was brilliant and he mentored me a lot. And he said to everyone, whatever conflict you have, bring it on the table. Once you walk out of this room, there is no conflict, there's only alignment. So all 7 of us have to speak the same language to the rest of the organization. We cannot be saying different things because that sends signals which are conflicting to the rest of the organization. While individually each function is looking at their leader in terms of what should be my behavior, what should be my team standing for, collectively they're looking at the management team as to what the organization stands for. And if there is loose talk by any of those CXOs, it pollutes the organization significantly. So, yes, culture is important towards making progress, towards success. There are companies which will probably make progress irrespective of what the management does. Probably they're riding the wave in the industry. So the question to be asked is progress happening because of you or despite you?
That's a very good point as well. I really wanted to dig in as well because I can imagine it's not that easy to get people aligned, right?
Yeah.
Because having that buy-in and having that sense of accountability, right? When you got the buy-in and having that alignment on shared vision, I can imagine it's not that easy. From your experience point of view, what strategies that you have come across that were effective enough bringing people aligned and work on one common shared vision?
I can say that for my team, which I was able to do across most organizations, because an organization's culture is the collective behavior of the management team.
Yes.
Shape it. Unless the person is an autocrat, and does not want anyone else to influence whatever is happening. There are organizations like that also. Some family organizations, large or small, behave like that. People are always trying to second guess the founder, the chairman, and say, okay, what would he think if I did something like this? And that's a bad place to be. And I've seen that not just in India, yeah, I've seen that in globally. Even in US, when you have a very powerful chairman of the company or the CEO of the company, everyone wants to make sure that they are looking good in the eyes of that person.
Mm.
So for the team, it is important to, like I said earlier, see your behaviors, see your interaction with them as feedback and positive reinforcement.
Mm.
At the same time, I don't remember who said that there's also a need to have courageous conversations. The courageous conversation is when something hasn't really worked, or you find a team member who is not up to the mark, not able to cope up with the work, is making the rest of the team lag behind or demotivating the rest of the team. You have to take action. And it's a difficult one for every person because intrinsically we are all human and we connect to people and we don't want to give them bad news. But if you don't give the bad news to that one person, there are 20 others who are probably not performing to their optimal level. And unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, I had many such interactions with many of my team members where I had to tell them, you are great, but you don't fit into the new context. You don't fit into what we want to achieve. So maybe your future lies elsewhere in any other organization. It's sad to see senior people cry in such conversations. It is sad to see their emotional outbursts. But what got to be done, got to be done. So culture gets created when you balance the people orientation with the result orientation. It is not one against the other, it is both together.
Both together. I mean, we often talk about leadership is all about being courageous, right? Being courageous to take bold decisions. And in fact, last week I presented a seminar to leaders on being a compassionate leadership, right? How you bring your compassion, being genuine care, but also bring your wisdom on the table. Because that having that wisdom will give you that sense of your ability to see and act and able to take right decisions. Like as you rightly pointed, is right, courageous decisions as well. So these are good insights. Or dig about some of the best practices, right? Every leader has got some sort of practices they follow. So I wanted to understand a bit more from yourself, Arun. Can you share a habit or a personal practice that you maintain that helps you to stay focused and effective in your role now as a board member and also being a co-founder for Fortytwo Labs? I mean, all your life as a leader, right? You've got countless demands on your times. How did you ensure that you were focused and effective? Is there any practice or best practices that you could share?
So some of the things that have shaped me and that continue to shape me even today. One, continuous learning.
Okay.
I've made a career in the technology field. From the time technology was in the back office to today, technology being in the hands of every consumer.
Okay.
I've seen the transition happen. And wherever I participated in any activity, people looked upon me as the expert to say, Arun should know what is right for me. So I spend even today 2 hours every day just reading and learning about what's happening in the industry, what are the new trends coming up. But it's not just today about technology. I also read about HR, I read about supply chain, I read about manufacturing, finance. I have some 30 newsletters that come to my inbox every day across various subjects, depending on the industry I'm working in, depending on the focus or the flavor of the day or the month. So Gen AI is the flavor of today. So I have to know everything there is that I can learn about Gen AI, because when I have a conversation in a public forum or in an organization, people expect me to give them inputs on what and how it will impact them. In fact, last board meeting, we had a great conversation around Gen AI and what it means. And the CIO did create some of those conversations. And then everyone looks at me. He's the right person to actually tell us, is it right, wrong, whatever. And I said, you're on the right path. And I added some more examples from my side. So this is one key thing that I think everyone should look at in their journey towards being good professionals and probably also add to their value as they grow in the organization. The second thing that I have always told everyone who has worked with me or who I have mentored, your place is not in your cabin. Your place is where the action is happening. When you are not in a meeting, wherever it might be, you should be out there talking to people in the organization, talk to your customers. If you're B2B, talk to your customers. You need to see how your organization is impacting them. And depending on your role, then you decide what can I do differently, which will then give them a result. Example I can give you, I was consulting for an agrochem company. They had one of the big consulting organizations who did a business strategy, and they asked me to help them align the technology strategy with the business strategy to achieve whatever objectives they wanted. And I said, I went through the big document that the consulting company had created. And I said, this is great, but I need to see on the ground what reality is. So I went to the manufacturing facility, I went to the warehouses, I went and met the farmers to say, why do you choose this company's product over others? What is it that is different for you? Why are you brand loyal to this company? And took all of that input and went back and said, great, these are the changes you need to make to your strategy because this is what is happening on the ground. And if you did not, we'll probably get there, but it will not be an easy journey for you. And in the next meeting, the conversation happened to say how many consultants had actually gone to the field. So management by walking around, which is one of the old phrases, today is about engagement at every layer of the organization. Some consultant a decade back called it design thinking, getting in customer shoes and then creating a solution. And I'm saying that's basic principles. You have to go back to basic principles before you create any kind of a solution to solve a problem or create a new opportunity. And that's the best way you will succeed. So these are two things that I have always done and continue to do even today in my engagements that I have.
It's quite inspiring, Arun, when you say that, right? That continuous learning is we often talk about, right? But how you made that as a part of your habitual excellence. And that's the way you kind of stay ahead of the curve as well. And especially you being in your current role as a board member, you're not just working for one industries, right? You might get opportunities working in different industries. So having that versatility comes from kind of learning, right? Continuous learning.
Yes.
Okay, great. If you had to give an advice to younger version of yourself, what advice you would give?
I think the one big thing I would tell my younger self, be humble.
Okay.
While you know a lot more than many others, it does not give you the license to be arrogant. And young professionals, especially when they are high professionals, are always arrogant.
So be humble and be humility is the key one. Okay, that's a great one. So okay, so what are your long-term aspirations now? What are you trying to focusing on to achieve? What does success look for you in the next 2 to 3 years, Arun?
So I'm at a stage in my life where it's more about giving than achieving, trying to help people succeed. Wherever I engage in whatever capacity, it's about giving them insights from my life, real life stories on where I succeeded, where I did not. And where I did not actually adds a lot more value to the people to say, okay, if you did what I did, you will probably not succeed. Because everyone today is in a different context, in a different reality. So while I do have a lot of stories as an old man, I think it's important for people to contextualize it before they decide to create a role model for themselves. But in the next 3 to 5 years, I hope to be able to do a lot more in terms of giving back to society at large, to industry at large, especially the industries which adopted me very well, retail and pharmaceuticals.
Okay.
I keep on going back and having conversations with those teams to say, okay, if you need help, reach out. It's not about me wanting to charge you something. It can be free of cost, but just reach out to me. I will give you inputs from my experience of having fallen, gotten up, done something. I hope you don't have to go through the learning curve of recreating the wheel.
These are very enriching, Arun. I've really enjoyed our interaction, and there's so many key takeaways from yourself. From being authentic to being vulnerable and being a best version of yourself. Right? You've shared a lot of stories here. You've shared a lot of examples that kind of I could personally resonate as well. And in fact, one of the advice is also being humble. As you grow, it's also very, very important to stay on the ground and share your experiences. And I think thank you once again for your wonderful for the wonderful opportunity and sharing your wisdom, because it's very inspiring, and I'm sure the viewers would learn a lot from you. I'm going to ping you, and I wanted to get those books, and I will put those books in the description as well.
I remember the author's name is Patrick Lencioni.
Okay, Patrick Lencioni. So brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you, Arun. And I once again have a wonderful day and a great weekend as well.
Thank you, Kiran.